Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the reality you've been living isn't yours. Not really. It's been carefully constructed, not by accident, but by design, to serve someone else's emotional hunger. That's the beginning of the super empath's awakening. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's subtle. A shift, a moment where something doesn't add up. And for the first time, you don't gaslight yourself into ignoring it. See, what makes the super empath different isn't just sensitivity or kindness. It's discernment. It's the ability to feel deeply while also thinking critically. But that strength in the wrong hands becomes a weapon used against them. Narcissists are masters of creating confusion. They twist reality until you doubt your own memory, your own instincts. And the super empath, because they lead with compassion, often gives the benefit of the doubt long after it's earned. They explain away the red flags. They make excuses. Maybe they had a tough childhood. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe if I just love them harder, but eventually something clicks. It might be a single lie you catch, a contradiction that's too obvious, or just that gut feeling, the one you've silenced so many times, finally screaming loud enough that you can't ignore it. And that moment, that's the beginning of the end. Not just for the relationship, for the illusion. Because once the super empath starts to wake up, the narcissist's entire game begins to unravel. Here's the thing. Narcissistic abuse isn't about bruises or yelling. It's about erosion, the slow, calculated dismantling of your identity. It's being taught to mistrust your intuition, to prioritize their needs over your own, and again until you no longer recognize yourself. And the narcissist, they thrive in that space, in your confusion, your self-doubt, your silence. Because as long as you're spinning in circles trying to figure them out, they stay in control. But when the super empath awakens, the power dynamic shifts. It's not about revenge. It's about clarity. Do that. It's about seeing the narcissist for what they are. Not the wounded soul you were trying to save, not the charming mask they wear in public, but the fragmented ego constantly feeding on chaos and control. It's about realizing that no amount of love can fill a void is determined to protect. This awakening is a deeply philosophical moment. It forces the empath to confront uncomfortable truths. Not just about the narcissist, but about themselves. Why did I stay? What part of me needed their approval? What past would made me so vulnerable to this dynamic? And these aren't easy questions. They require courage, introspection, and a willingness to burn down the false self you had to come just to survive. But here's the paradox. That burning, it's also the liberation, because once you see the game, you can't unsee it. You stop participating, you stop performing, you stop giving emotional responses just to avoid conflict or make peace. And that quiet defiance, that refusal to play the role anymore, is what terrifies the narcissist most. Not the yelling, not the tears, the silence, the neutrality, the awareness. And I want to be clear, this awakening doesn't happen overnight. It's messy, it's painful. Sometimes it takes multiple attempts, multiple exits. But each time, you gain more clarity, more strength. You start to remember who you were before the manipulation. Or maybe you meet that version of yourself for the first time. Unfiltered, unedited, and powerful. The super empath's awakening, just a personal moment. It's a psychological rebellion. It's the moment a person chooses to value truth over illusion, self-respect over validation, and reality over fantasy. And once that happens, the narcissist loses control. Not because the empath fought back, but because they stopped feeding the dynamic. So if you're in that space where things don't quite add up, where your heart knows but your mind isn't sure, listen. Don't rush it. Watch. Just start observing. Watch the patterns. Trust the data of your own experience, because the truth isn't hiding. It's been there all along. You just had to be ready to see it. And when you do, that's the beginning of your freedom. Improve something every time. Because the scariest thing to a narcissist isn't exposure. It's losing control of the one person who could see through them and chose to walk away anyway. Once you felt that first crack in the foundation, where you see how the narcissist's reality is built brick by brick out of your confusion and doubt, the next step is to map out how that structure stays standing in the first place. You start to notice there's more at play than just hurt feelings or bad behavior. There's a system of control designed to keep you off balance, and understanding that system is how you begin to take it apart. Think about the last time someone you cared for reacted explosively to a boundary. You said something as simple as, "I need space," and they turned it into a drama of tears, threats, guilt. Suddenly you're apologizing, explaining yourself, trying to soothe them. Even though you did nothing wrong, that reaction is exactly what they want. A narcissist craves emotional currency, your tears, your anger, your confusion. Those reactions fuel their sense of importance, and they'll engineer chaos just to get that hit. It's like watching a poker player who chews gum and taps his foot to unnerve you into making a bad hand. The empath's compassion, their eagerness to heal and connect, becomes the table stakes. But here's where the super empath flips the script. Knowledge is the ultimate power. Once you recognize that these emotional storms are less about you and more about their need for validation, you can lean back instead of leaning in. You begin to see the patterns: accusation, drama, remorse, repeat. It's a loop designed to keep you scrambling. And every time you react, you hand over another piece of your agency. When you refuse to play, when you respond with curiosity instead of panic, what do you need right now? You take a step out of the cycle. And make no mistake, this is a profound act of rebellion. Philosophers have been talking about free will versus determinism for centuries. But here it's distilled into a clear choice. Will you respond to the manipulative script, or will you write your own lines? Detaching from the drama isn't cold. It's clarity. It's clarity. It's choosing your own moral code over someone else's manipulative theater. You start to realize that boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're markers that define where you begin and they end. This isn't theoretical. It shows up in real moments, in the way you withhold your emotional supply instead of pouring it out, Maybe you answer a text later rather than immediately. Maybe you stay calm when they lash out. Maybe you say, I won't discuss this until we're both level-headed. And suddenly, the narcissist's arsenal, gaslighting, blame, shifting, love bombing, loses its ammunition. Because without your emotional reaction, the whole operation fizzles. They're left trying to stir a pond that's gone still. Now, let's get philosophical for a moment. Every relationship is a microcosm of larger societal power dynamics. We talk about oppressive systems, about the way power circulates in institutions and economies, but here it's intimate. It's one person quietly siphoning off your emotional energy while you think you're just giving love. By understanding that dynamic, you become the kind of thinker who sees through the illusion, who dissects the mechanics of control. That skill translates beyond the personal. It's the same critical eye you use to spot manipulation at work, in politics, in media. You're training yourself to see where power is being hoarded or misused, and that makes you stronger everywhere. Don't mistake this understanding for cynicism. It's actually a form of radical trust in yourself. You're saying, I trust my judgment enough to see this game for what it is. And with that trust comes freedom. You're no longer bound by their narrative. You get to narrate your own life. When the empath shifts from participant to observer, the narcissist loses the stage. Of course, this takes practice. You'll slip up. You'll find yourself drawn back in by that familiar roller coaster of emotions. But each time you catch the pattern sooner, each time you hold your boundary a little firmer, you reclaim another piece of your power. And over time, your confidence grows. The dynamic becomes less about a battle and more about a transfer of authority from someone else back to you. So recognize the power dynamic for what it is, a transaction where your empathy is currency. And then decide you'd rather bank your compassion on yourself, use it to foster healthy connections, rather than fueling someone else's ego. When you do that, you change the equation. Not with aggression, but with awareness. That's the true leverage the super empath holds. And here's what to carry with you. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're declarations of self-respect. By understanding the power dynamic, you not only protect your own sanity, but you revolutionize the way you relate to the world. And that, more than anything else, is the downfall of a narcissist's kingdom. Feel that shift. You're not just escaping a toxic dynamic. You're forging a new paradigm of strength grounded in clarity and compassion. And the world around you will never look the same. Let's talk about pain. Not the kind that comes from a stub toe or a breakup text, but the deeper kind. The kind that reshapes how you see yourself. The kind you carry in your body, even when you smile. The kind you pick up slowly over time. In a relationship with someone who makes you question your worth, your memory, even your sanity, that pain, it's brutal, it's heavy. And for most people, it feels like a dead end. But for the super empath, that pain becomes fuel, it becomes transformation. And that's where the game flips. Now, we're not romanticizing suffering here. Pain doesn't make you wise by default. Pain just hurts. What makes the difference is what you have to do with it. For most people stuck in the narcissist empath cycle, the pain becomes identity. I was used. I was betrayed. I was broken. And those are valid feelings. But staying in that space too long turns pain into a story that defines you. That's where the narcissist wins. Because now, even after they're gone, you're still living inside the script they wrote. But the super empath, they don't stay in victim mode. They take that raw emotion, grief, anger, confusion, and they start to process it, break it down, examine it. They ask deeper questions. Why did I allow this? What patterns am I repeating? What did this teach me about my boundaries, my needs, my blind spots? That's the emotional transmutation, turning pain into power through self-awareness. And it's not just healing, it's alchemy. You're converting something that was meant to destroy you into something that makes you indestructible. This isn't just therapy talk. It's real neuroscience. Emotional pain activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. When you're gaslit or manipulated, your brain lights up like you've been burned. But the brain also has neuroplasticity. If can change, adapt, rewire. So when the super empath starts choosing to reflect instead of react, to respond instead of ruminate, new pathways form. You literally become someone new, not because you've escaped the trauma, but because you've metabolized it into clarity. It's like leveling up in a video game. Before, every insult, every silent treatment, every manipulation felt like a direct hit. But now you've got armor. You recognize the pattern. You don't take the bait. And that strength doesn't come from being tough. It comes from integrating your emotional experience in a conscious, reflective way. You've been to hell, and instead of coming back bitter, you came back brilliant. Now let's pull back and look at the philosophical layer. The Stooks said that pain is unavoidable, but suffering is optional. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Holocaust and founder of logotherapy, wrote that meaning is what allows humans to transcend suffering. And this is where the super empath's power becomes existential. They don't just want to survive, they want to understand. They want to evolve. And that search for meaning is what breaks the trauma bond. That's what ends the cycle. Because once your pain has purpose, the narcissist no longer owns it, you do. And here's the twist that makes this truly terrifying for the narcissist. They expect you to stay broken. That's the whole game. They feed off your reactions, your despair, your need for closure. But when you start to heal, grow, and thrive, when you turn that emotional devastation into wisdom, they're left powerless. Because you're not who you were when they met you. You've outgrown the cage they built, and you walked out with the key in your hand. This journey isn't linear. You'll have days where you feel invincible and others where the memories hit hard. That's okay. Healing is nonlinear. Think of it like a spiral. You'll revisit the pain, but from a higher place each time. With more perspective, more distance, more insight. That's progress. And if you're in that messy middle right now, where you're hurting but also waking up, let me tell you something important. Your pain is not pointless. It's the beginning of your evolution. You're not just recovering from what happened. You're becoming someone the narcissist never wanted you to be: sovereign, clear-eyed, and unshakable. So when it hurts, when it really hurts, don't numb it. Don't run from it. Sit with it. Listen to what it's trying to teach you, because that pain is a map. And if you're brave enough to follow it, it'll lead you back to yourself, stronger, smarter, and far more powerful than you ever imagined. Pain may be the spark, but transformation is the fire. Light it. Let it burn. Let it become your beginning. Let's be honest, when most people picture a breakup with a narcissist, they imagine fireworks, screaming matches, tears, explosions of emotion. But the super empath doesn't exit like that. Not because they're weak or scared, but because they've evolved beyond the narcissist game. They've already learned that any dramatic exit is just another trap, a final act in the narcissist theater. So instead, they go silent, strategic, neutral. And that quiet exit, that's what delivers the deepest blow. Here's why narcissists crave chaos. They don't just feed on praise, they feed on attention, positive or negative, it doesn't matter. Your emotional reaction is their fuel. That's why they poke, prod, and provoke. If they can't have your love, they'll settle for your rage. If they can't keep you hooked through affection, they'll use guilt, blame, or fear. But it's all to keep you engaged, to keep your focus on them. When you're reacting, they're in control. But when a super empath decides to leave, they don't storm out. They don't beg for closure. They don't write long letters trying to be understood, they observe. They plan. They disconnect, not just physically, but emotionally. And this is the key difference. Anyone can block a number, but it takes deep inner work to reach the point where you have no longer need anything from the narcissist, not love, not apologies, not even acknowledgement. That's when the exit becomes lethal, not to the empath, but to the illusion the narcissist spent so long creating, because now the narrative falls apart. They can't twist your words if you're not speaking. They can't bait you if you're not biting, and they can't control the story if you're no longer in the scene. It's not just psychological, it's philosophical. This kind of exit is a rejection of the narcissist's entire worldview. You're saying, I no longer participate in your reality. You're stepping out of the matrix they've built, system where they are always the center and you orbit around them, constantly adjusting your behavior to keep the peace. The silent exit is your refusal to orbit. You become your own center, and in doing so, you dismantle the entire structure, and it messes with them deeply, because narcissists believe they are irreplaceable. They construct their identity around the idea that you can't walk away, not really, that you'll always come back, that they still have a hook in you somewhere. So when the empath walks, not with a bang, but with calm, grounded certainty, it shatters the narcissist's internal script. This wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to change. You weren't supposed to figure it out. And maybe the most dangerous part of that silent exit, it exposes the narcissist to themselves. It holds up a mirror, but this time there's no empath around to buffer the reflection. Without your energy to stabilize them, they're left alone with their own emptiness. No supply, no audience, just silence. And for someone who's spent their entire life running from their inner void, that silence is deafening. But let's be clear, this kind of exit doesn't happen because the empath suddenly stopped caring. It happens because they finally started caring about themselves more. It's a shift from external validation to internal alignment. It's no longer about trying to fix the other person. It's about choosing peace over chaos, self-respect over codependency, clarity over confusion. And yes, it takes strength. It takes restraint not to respond to that final guilt trip, not to defend yourself when they smear your name, not to chase closure from someone who benefits from keeping the door cracked open. But in that restraint, there is power. You're no longer reactive. You're intentional. And that, more than anything else, is the narcissist's nightmare, someone they can't control. So if you're preparing to exit, or if you already have, don't underestimate the power of your silence. Don't mistake calm for weakness. It takes courage to walk away without burning the whole place down. It takes vision to see that your energy is sacred and that not everyone deserves access to it. Here's what you walk away with: not just distance, but direction. You're not running away, you're moving forward. And in doing so, you're teaching your nervous system, your heart, your soul, that peace isn't just possible. It's your new normal. When you leave without a scream, without a scene, without permission, you send the loudest message of all. You never needed their validation to reclaim your power. Once the super empath walks away, something fascinating happens, something the narcissist never expects. The spotlight shifts, not toward them, but toward you. And I don't just mean in the literal sense of people paying attention to your glow up, your healing, your rising confidence. Though that happens too. I'm talking about an energetic shift, a deep internal expansion that begins the moment you reclaim your time, your voice, your peace. See, for so long, you were tethered to a system that demanded your attention, your compassion, your constant emotional labor. You were essentially running on low battery, always plugging your energy into someone else's drama. But once that circuit is cut, once the narcissist is no longer your emotional priority, your inner world opens up. All that energy you used to spend decoding their behavior, second-guessing yourself, or trying to fix what couldn't be fixed, it suddenly becomes theirs available. And that's when things start to get powerful. It's like emotional compound interest. The more distance you put between yourself and the narcissist, the more clarity you gain. And with clarity comes momentum. You begin to create, not just recover. Your brain, once foggy with gaslighting and self-doubt, starts lighting up with ideas, goals, realizations. You reconnect with parts of yourself that went dormant in survival mode. Maybe your creativity returns. Maybe your intuition gets louder. Maybe you start dreaming again. These are not random side effects. This is what it looks like when you stop pouring your soul into a black hole and start investing in your own becoming. Now, here's the part most people miss this post-exit phase. Isn't just about healing from what was. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be before you were interrupted. The super empath isn't created by the narcissist. They're revealed through contrast. It's because you've lived the darkness that your inner light becomes undeniable. You start to see that your sensitivity, your insight, your empathy, these are not weaknesses. They're not liabilities. They're gifts. You just had them pointed at the wrong person. And that's a critical pivot. When your empathy is no longer used to enable dysfunction, it becomes transformative. You start using it to connect, to create, to lead. You become magnetic, not because you're performing for validation, but because you're rooted in authenticity. People feel that. You walk into a room and the energy shifts, not because you're loud, but because you're aligned. That's the super empath in their post-exit calm, grounded, quietly, unstoppable. But let's not sugarcoat it. There's still grief. There's still the ache of betrayal, the memories that hit out of nowhere. You might still have moments where you miss who you thought the narcissist was. That's normal. Healing doesn't erase the past. It integrates it. But here's the difference now. Those moments don't knock you down. They don't define you. They remind you how far you've come. And each time you choose peace over the pull of the past, you reinforce your freedom. This journey is not about revenge. It's not about proving them wrong. The narcissist may never apologize. They may never admit what they did. But that doesn't matter anymore because your growth is no longer dependent on their awareness. Your power doesn't need their recognition. That's what really shakes them. Not your anger, not your departure, but your evolution. You're building a new life from the inside out. And every step you take, you're showing others what's possible. You're modeling something revolutionary that you can survive deep psychological warfare and come out wiser, stronger, more compassionate. Not because of what happened, but in spite of it. You become the proof that darkness doesn't get the final say. You do. And the best part, you don't need to advertise your healing. You don't need to post cryptic quotes or throw shade or wait for karma to circle back. You are the karma, your existence, your joy, your peace. It's the loudest testimony there is. Because nothing disturbs a narcissist more than the one they underestimated becoming the version of themselves they were always afraid of, fully realized, emotionally sovereign, untouchable. So here's what I want you to carry with you. Sai, you are not who they told you were. You are who you decide to become now. Here's where it all comes full circle. The super empath doesn't just walk away stronger. They walk away transformed. And that transformation becomes contagious. It starts quietly, maybe with setting a boundary, maybe with saying no without guilt, maybe with simply not apologizing for taking up space, and it builds not in a loud, flashy way, but in something much deeper alignment. This final phase is where the super empath becomes untouchable, not because they're invincible, but because they're unavailable to manipulation. They're no longer operating from the wound, they're operating from the lesson. That's the true exit. Not just from the relationship, but from the entire internal pattern that made the narcissist possible in the first place. That pattern of over-explaining, over-giving, waiting to be chosen, needing to be understood, that dies here. Because now you've chosen yourself. That self-selection is a massive psychological shift. See, narcissists build their power through external narratives. They control the story. About you, about them, about the relationship. But the super empath's final act isn't revenge or exposure. It's rewriting the story entirely. Quietly, from within. It's no longer, they hurt me. It becomes, I saw through it. I healed, I grew. That doesn't mean you forget. It means you reframe, and the reframe matters. When you tell your story from the lens of agency instead of victimhood, something incredible happens. Your past stops being a prison and starts becoming a platform. Every red flag you missed becomes a lesson. Every time you silence your voice becomes a moment you now honor. You become your own reference point, your own validator. That's where the narcissist loses all remaining influence. You don't need closure because you created clarity. Now, here's the psychological depth. Narcissists rely on the belief that you won't change, that you'll always return to the dynamic, that you'll always feel just enough self-doubt to keep you tethered. But when the super empath evolves past that, when they begin to trust their own perception more than the narcissist's version of events, it severs the psychic bond, that invisible thread. Cut. Not because of drama, but because of growth. And growth is something the narcissist can't follow you into. They're too busy avoiding their own reflection. Philosophically, this whole journey is an initiation. It's a rite of passage disguised as heartbreak. You were tested emotionally, spiritually, existentially. You were dismantled and disoriented. But that disorientation forced you inward. And once you went inward, you found your core. That part of you that was never lost, just buried. And once that part of you wakes up, it doesn't go back to sleep. That's what makes the super empath dangerous in the best way. Because now you carry truth, you carry discernment, you walk into every room, every interaction with a level of presence that people feel, even if they can't name it. You can spot manipulation within minutes. You can say no without guilt. You no longer bend to fit dysfunctional systems. You disrupt them by existing authentically. And that disruption is healing not just for you, but for others. Because people watch. They feel your evolution. Maybe they're still stuck in their own toxic cycles, their own fog, but then they see you clear-eyed, unapologetic, alive, and they realize there's a way out. That's how your healing becomes a revolution. Quiet, subtle, unstoppable. Look, this doesn't mean you won't be triggered. It doesn't mean you won't have flashbacks or moments of vulnerability, but it means you're now equipped. You can hold space for your humanity without losing your identity. That's what maturity looks like. Not perfection, but integration. And maybe that's the point of it all. Not just to escape the narcissist, but to excavate the self. To unlearn the programming that taught you love was something to earn. To realize that peace was never supposed to be rare. To finally fully understand that your sensitivity isn't a liability, it's a superpower. Not in the way the world markets it, but in the quiet, steady way that changes lives, one boundary, one truth, one act of self-respect at a time. So if you've made it this far in your journey, or if you're just starting, remember this: you're not here to prove your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. You're here to remember who you are and to live from that place authentically, boldly, without apology. The narcissist's worst nightmare isn't your anger, it's your evolution.